Okay. So this is me. My name is Clements, and I've been funded as an individual by Emergence Foundation, support for which I'm really grateful, because as you'll hear, this is kind of an evolving project, and it's been really amazing to have some support to kind of be evolving it this year. The project is called Healing Solidarity, and I'm going to start by telling you actually a bit about what it is and what it does. And then I'm going to have a few reflections on my own kind of learning with it over the past 18 months that I've been running it. And it's the sort of last 6 months that's been supported by the Emergence Foundation. And then I'm going to offer you a question to reflect on with the person next to you as well. So just to say what's going to happen in this session. So I'll talk to this, but I just wanted to put it up there because it's a slightly, maybe not complicated idea, but an idea nevertheless that I'm working with. So my background is in what I call it international development in inverted commas. You'll see why in a minute, but in international development spaces. And the project is really about asking the question of what does a solidarity with people in other parts of the world and also people that we're alongside that heals rather than replicates injustice look like? That's kind of my big question, I guess. And Healing Solidarity started as an online event that I ran in 2018 where I got together about 25 people, different people, and interviewed them, conversations about work that was really on the margins of what you might call the international development space, that was experimenting with new models of funding that were less prescriptive, that was experimenting with supporting well-being and healing work in the context of international spaces, and also some people who had critique on the current kind of development and aid system, which I don't know how much people in the room know about that, but in all the years that I've worked in this space, the last few decades, there's been certainly a critique of the way in which the systems of distributing development and aid, resourcing and financing, and also kind of practice have tended to replicate the injustice that the project of making the world a fairer and more equitable place seems to be against. So there's been this tension, and it's a tension that's very well theorized about. So when people go to university and study development, they read all about the problems with it, and then when they come to work in the kind of business of development, they find themselves often feeling torn around the extent to which they feel that they're replicating some of the problems, which have their roots in racism, in a colonial kind of history of how we engage with other people in other parts of the world, and also the problems of poverty and injustice also have their roots in hundreds of years of oppression and injustice. So Healing Solidarity is really about offering support for practitioners and activists, so people working in the mainstream development space and the kinds of organisations you might have supported, read about, heard about, but also people who are interested in what does it look like to do this differently, right? And centrally it's about challenging both inequity and also I put overwork there because there's also a sense in lots of people I've worked with and talked to that there's a very heavily bureaucratic system in the sector that kind of keeps people very busy and they don't have time to really reflect on their practice. So it's trying to challenge some of that. So instead promoting reflection, healing, I'll talk a bit about what I mean by that in a minute, and a more embodied approach, and supporting sustainable working practice. So, and hopefully in doing so, inspiring practitioners to radically question the sector, including a lack of diversity, and trying to shift practice away from I put top-down model of change, but what we're also really talking about is decisions being made for the most part in kind of global capitals, in so supposedly developed countries, often by people with white privilege and power, and not by the people whose lives are directly affected by the work, right? So how do we shift this? And some of the people I interviewed in the first conference have got examples of how they can try to shift that. But how do we bring that shift towards the mainstream is part of the question I'm asking with this work. How do I do it? So Emergence Foundation have supported an ongoing online community space which is called the Healing Solidarity Collective. And then there's going to be, well, there have been 2 so far, annual conferences, which are these recorded events. I realised earlier that I should have actually had some of the videos for you to see, but I didn't do that. But if you go onto the website, which is healingsolidarity.org, you can get access to the community in which you can find some of those videos and stuff. So, and then there's downloadable recordings of the conference and regular other online events through the year that are delivered through this Healing Solidarity platform. And now what I'm evolving towards is virtual practice groups around specific topics. So exploring what does it mean to be anti-racist and decolonial in the work, exploring what does it mean to centre well-being in our work, exploring issues in smaller groups. They're still virtual at the moment, and there are there's a big community of people in this country engaged in the work, but there are also people from all over the world that have engaged in the conference. So there's virtue in some of it being virtual, if that makes sense. But also coming soon, I'm going to pilot some in-person events as well, which will again be around reflecting around some of these issues and helping people to explore them for themselves, in the hope that they can then take that back into their work in the sector. And also the other thing that's supported by the grant is formalising the structure of the project and developing an advisory board, so it's not just kind of me, which is where it came from. Oh, I put a couple of quotes from people who had engaged with the project, but really just to say that I was amazed by how many people signed up for the original conference, and there are now well over 2,000 people on the mailing list. So and I get lots of emails and people contacting me and wanting more and wanting to go deeper and explore the topics further. So I feel like there's a real moment and appetite for this work. I wanted to share a few reflections, because what I notice a lot in this work is that for many of us, the choice to want to get involved in supporting work against poverty, work against injustice in different parts of the world tends to get accompanied by a desire to kind of have solutions. Right? To know the answer, to know what to do next. And actually what's in the centre of the work I'm doing with Healing Solidarity is trying to invite people to think about what it means to show up in solidarity where you haven't got the answers, where it's not you that knows, where the first thing you do is listen and actively listen. And maybe you have to relinquish what you thought the answers were, where you have to be able to be in a place of letting go of, I know better or we know better. And so the question then comes, what is the inner work that we need to be able to do that effectively, to be able to show up in solidarity without feeling we need to push an agenda or a way of doing things on other people? What does that actually look like? And one of the things that I've been learning through this work is that once we get to talk, and actually there's not been a great deal of conversation in the development sector in general about racism and how we can be anti-racist practitioners, but that's the theme that comes up again and again in Healing Solidarity. And once you start to explore that with people, what I've realised again and again is that oppression doesn't just happen in our minds. It's not just something that we can debate and discuss away, and that actually oppression happens in our bodies. We experience it in our bodies, and and our reactions to situations that might feel threatening to us, or in which we may be being oppressed, or in which we may be a person who's in the role of an oppressor. That there's a physical aspect to that. We experience it in our bodies and we act with our bodies, and so it isn't just something that can be discussed and theorized out of existence. And so the work that I'm beginning to do, is that a fire alarm? Okay. The work that we're beginning to do is to really help people to explore some of these issues within the context of this so-called development space that I really want to be about solidarity, rather than trying to create some kind of idea of development that we know, right? That the idea of developed societies or developed countries is quickly being discredited, right? So what is it to be in solidarity in climate justice movements? What is it to be in solidarity? And what are the skills that we need to build within ourselves? What's the inner work is really the question that I'm trying to explore with Healing Solidarity. And so what I wanted to do actually is to invite you to explore that for yourself with the person next to you. So what for you is the inner work that you're doing, or the practices, the inner work being many of the things that we've talked about today, and whatever that means for you. But what's the inner work that supports you being in solidarity with others? And that could be I've given an option there, it could be in global struggles to end injustice and poverty, or it could be closer to home. But what is it that supports you to show up in solidarity? In solidarity rather than in trying to fix, right? In solidarity rather than in trying to change. In solidarity rather than in you know best. But please, do feel free to come and talk to me about the project. That's who I am. That if you want to see more about the work, healingsolidarity.org is where you go. That's me. Yeah, thank you.